Welcome to the Human Longevity Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Petersen. Together, we're about to explore the science and solutions that will help you live better, longer. Today, we're going to unpack longevity, and we're going to move beyond healthcare all the way to life extension. Now, be sure to go over to humanlongevity.com/podcast. There is a free age reversal course waiting there for you, and information on today's podcast, our guests, and the special gift that Novos has for you. humanlongevity.com/podcast. Now, let's get into the show. Today, I'm joined by an incredible guest, Chris Mirabile. He's the founder and CEO of Novos Labs. They are the first nutraceutical company to actually target the 12 biological causes of aging to increase longevity. He leads Novos, bringing a lifetime of passion and a personal pursuit of health and wellness, including overcoming and fully recovering from a brain tumor at the young age of 16. Chris is a serial entrepreneur with multiple successful companies under his belt that could actually age anyone at an accelerated pace. Yet, here at the almost chronological age of 40, Chris has successfully reduced his biological age by 37%, his pace of aging by 31%, and his telomere length is the equivalent of a 7-year-old. Chris, we can't wait to get your secrets. I tell you what. And gang, his biological age is sitting right in that of the mid 20. So this makes him, to me, the perfect guest today to really pull back the curtain and talk about this longevity revolution. We're going to get the science and we're going to get the secrets so that together we can be ageless and live limitless. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. And I assure you, I don't behave like a 7-year-old, even if my telomeres are similar.
Well, keeping the youthful spirit. There's bonus in that. My dad literally, as we're coming out of the holidays, he will say all the time. So chronologically now he's in his 70s, but he's just like, I still feel like I'm 18. And he's still pretty boyish. I think there's maybe a secret in there to longevity is maintaining that youthful sense of play and curiosity in the world.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I'm envisioning myself just a few months ago when I was at one of those jumping castles, playing playing dodgeball with 8-year-olds and them hitting me in the head with the dodgeball. So yeah, there is an element of that, definitely.
Yeah, we just need to make sure that we're maintaining proper hydration, good nutrition. We'll talk about that today so that the flexibility is there to keep up with all the demands, be they a dodgeball in a bouncy house or, whatever is going to come at us in life. So, Chris, there's so much I want to cover today. And for those who have not yet had just the privilege to get to hear from you and your story, let's go ahead and talk about how you, again, I'm going to call you young because you're much younger than I am. So at the young age of almost 40, you are a leader in the longevity space. And there's still, to many, the idea that this conversation really is only for the person 55 and up, which I do not agree 100%. And so you are leading the way at a young chronological age to really kind of redefine this conversation. But how did you land in the field of longevity?
Well, you hinted at it in the introduction, which was my experience with a brain tumor as a teenager. So when I was 12 years old, I was already into fitness and health, and I was watching what I was eating and exercising and trying to get into good shape. So it was that much more of a surprise to me when at 16 years old, I was suddenly struck with a seizure and woke up with blood all over myself in New York City on the floor. And an ambulance rushed me to the hospital where they discovered that I had a brain tumor. And that experience really transformed my thinking in every aspect of life and what I want to get out of life and how precious it is, but also pragmatically, when it came to my health. I was from a very early age looking at the long-term impacts that different health decisions I was making could have on me. So whereas most people are very short-sighted when it comes to their health goals, right? It is like, let me lose some weight or let me feel more energized or more focused at work or sleep better or better libido or whatever it might be. Let me improve my skin. How often are people saying, I want to improve those things, but actually make it last for as long as possible? It's not very often. But I was thinking that way from an early age because of this experience. And so going through my 20s, I was constantly trying to figure out what could I do to keep myself as healthy as possible for as long as possible. And I would just refer to the almighty source, PubMed, right? Instead of going to the magazines and so on, I would go straight to PubMed and search for different keywords and just read through the research to try to figure things out for myself, for my lifestyle and the different things I was experimenting with in my life. And as a result of that, I fortunately came across the now seminal paper, The Hallmarks of Aging, that was published in Cell. I came across this about a decade ago, and that was a moment of epiphany for me because that paper, it basically cataloged the different biological reasons from a microscopic perspective as to why we get older in the first place. And so this now gave me a new lens through which I could look through when I was making these different health decisions. I could say, is what I'm doing, whether it be the supplement or the diet plan or the lifestyle that I'm integrating, is there research to indicate that it improves mitochondrial health or cellular senescence or proteostasis and so on? Or can it possibly have negative effects? And although I wouldn't always have the full answer, at least I now had this new perspective through which I could look, which eventually evolved to where I find myself today with the approach I take for my own lifestyle and for my company.
Hmm. So about a decade ago, so again, you would have been just approaching 30. And I find it so fascinating that I really do love, and I'm sure, so we'll talk about one of your biological age test. So Ryan Smith over at True Diagnostics, there's this group of like mid 30 something year olds that are just so fascinated by this and really leading it. And to me, that speaks volumes, right? Because I believe that for so long we have been shown and given a vision of what it means to chronologically age that's not very inspiring to many. And exactly what kind of opened it up for you, like you're just like, hey, how can I be as well as possible as long as possible? Because you had your own personal health experience in a crisis that gave you perspective, which many of us don't have at such a young age. So it was a gift inside of that moment for you that gave you such a unique perspective to say, I want to really appreciate what I have and have it as long as possible. And many of us just assume we're going to have it, but the picture that we see, the as long as possible, isn't, again, it's not very, very inspiring. And so now that we understand, we're sitting at this time in history to appreciate that aging is a process. It actually starts the moment we are conceived, and it never stops until we leave this physical form. So it's this metabolic process, building up, breaking down, building up and breaking down. And and so do we have to just accept aging as a process? Can we actually take control of it? Can we actually slow it down, stop, or reverse it? And so the reason that I believe that the hallmarks were so, just profound is that it was kind of like, well, yeah, no, we really can slow this down, stop, and possibly reverse the whole darn thing if we understand the terrain, exactly what you're saying. Now, what you've done over at Novos is you've been first to market with this. It was just last year that those original 9 hallmarks were kind of upgraded. Like it was hedging to 10, then 11, and finally we're at 12 hallmarks. And you somehow got ahead of it all. You knew what was coming because of your scientific advisory board, probably. And you have the first to market product that is addressing all 12 of these hallmarks. So let's talk about that for a few moments. Like, were you already positioned? Did you change the formula? Did you kind of, how did you land yourself here to be first to market with such a comprehensive approach to slowing down the rate and pace of biological aging with your product lines?
So I think you already know the answer. Like you mentioned, the scientific advisory board that we have. So we have amazing scientists from Harvard, like George Church and MIT, like Matt Caberline and the Salk Institute, like Pamela Maher, and so on. So these are people who are intimately familiar with the scientific literature and even the preprints or even pre-preprints, right? So the research as it's being done and is very aware of these hallmarks of aging, so to speak. And so when we were formulating, we were cognizant of these. And, one, for example, that was not included in these 12 hallmarks that we also considered, you could argue maybe it's the 13th, is cross-linking. So when we were formulating, we were thinking of all 12 of these, even though there were only 9 officially declared in a nearly decade-old paper, and then additional aspects of aging like cross-linking, like the microbiome, like autophagy, and so on. So the ingredients that we chose, we follow different principles. If you go to our website and you go to, I believe, the science section in the main menu, we talk about the approach, and that approach follows 8 different principles of what is required for ingredients to be included in our formula. And one of those is that each ingredient needs to favorably impact at least one, but ideally multiple of the hallmarks of aging. And then it goes through other aspects, like, for example, the ingredient needs to have favorable lifespan impacts on multiple species, hinting at conserved evolutionary pathways. It needs to be something safe that's been in the human body or in our food supply or water supply for long periods of time, something GRAS according to FDA and EFSA, and so on. So there's a number of these that we followed. And so, we made sure that we were going to be able to impact all of these, but then also being very aware of the synergistic properties of certain pathways, but then also potentially dysergies. Ways that combining ingredients could actually potentially counteract each other or lead to a worse outcome, which is something that can happen when you build these different stacks of different ingredients. So we were cognizant of that all while creating this formulation for Novos Core.
Well, and I really want to thank you. I mean, you and I spoke a few minutes before we got to start this podcast today, and that is something that is so important to me because the consumer does not really understand. Again, when we're just kind of in the supplement space, it doesn't matter if it's longevity or otherwise. You see these formulations, and we've all come to think of more must be better, right? The more ingredients with the more, and I love your stack. Your ingredients are all very steeped in the literature and the data. So they're all efficacious completely. And so what is important is understanding the companies out there that are really looking at those covariables, right? So what is synergistic and what enhances and what takes away is basically what we're saying here. What makes it better? What neutralizes it? What, if anything, could make it worse? And so to know that you guys are also really taking that into account, because not all companies do. As well as kind of that dosing of it and the delivery system of it. But most importantly, is that aging is not just a simple, if we even look at the evolution of from the 9 to the 10 to the 11 to the 12
Right.
to the, you're proposing 13, right, with cross-linking
Sure.
hallmarks, what we continue to get to appreciate is that it's a moving target. And it's not a straight path in to say, how do we crack this code to truly turn back the hands of time? And if we can appreciate that it is complex, it is multimodal, yet there's also simplicity in it, right? And if we can just appreciate that there is this inner communication and there's an interplay with the outer world and outer communication, then to me, I think it's kind of this dance between the two. And I'm just curious, in your study, looking both in the microscope as well as kind of living it, this is your lifelong passion. What are your thoughts on what's really moving the needle the most at slowing down this rate and pace of biological aging?
That's a great question. And so one thing I want to emphasize is that these different biological causes of aging, or these mechanisms or hallmarks, whatever you'd like to call them, they're all interacting with each other, right? So it's this complex web where if one is in a less than ideal state, it's going to then cause the others. It's going to have a cascading effect on the other hallmarks as well, right?
Right.
So there might be certain hallmarks that are a little bit more powerful or significant than others, but if you're messing one up, you're probably messing the others up, right? And an analogy I like to think of is a car. If you've got an old car from, say, the 1950s, if if you haven't been maintaining it for all of these years, and you just open the garage and you see this car, it's going to have flat tires, there's going to be rust, the muffler may have fallen off, the doors are going to, make noise when you open them, maybe fall off of the hinge or something, right? And so if you go in and you just repair the tires or you fill them with air, you might be able to roll that car out, but you're not going to get very far. You really need to maintain everything, right? Not just the engine. Even if the engine is the driving force behind that car, you're still not going to get very far if the tires or the wheels aren't inflated, right? So you need to account for all of it. And this is part of the philosophy that we had when we started Novos. And I was talking to scientists and networking with them prior to launching the business, basically asking them this question. What do you think of taking the approach of impacting all of the hallmarks of aging simultaneously rather than just one or two? Because all of the academics and the biotech companies that I was coming across in my research and my networking, they were only focusing on one or two hallmarks at a time, because science is reductionistic. You want to start with a very simple problem and solve that problem, so to speak, before you move on to more complex things. But in this real world setting where you and I are getting older with each day, we don't have the time to wait for science to figure everything out. That will take decades or maybe even longer. So my entrepreneurial mind was, how can we impact all of these simultaneously? And it was a unanimous agreement across the scientists I was speaking with that would probably be the best way to make the most significant impact on the aging process, to address all of them at once. So I would say that is, in my opinion, the best way to address aging is to address all of them at the same time. Now, there's some that would argue, say the epigenome is one of the bigger contributors to the aging process. Others might say mitochondrial dysfunction, or maybe proteostasis and the lack of ability for cells to properly communicate with each other as you get older. I don't think anyone knows for certain what is going to be the most powerful of them all, but I can say that it is almost definitely the case that solving one single mechanism is not going to then solve the aging process. It'll just be one of multiple steps we need to take.
Right. And if we really kind of pull back and see the big, beautiful picture, whether you're a clinician or a consumer, it truly is that it's all what we make it. And we're living at this time and this opportunity. And we're going to really I want your opinion on why you think longevity has become so popular just in the last few years, like why it's a buzzword. But before I ask you to answer that question, point I want to make is that we all, right? So we all have ingredients that go into the recipe of the expression of our life. And if we just look at our genetic code, right down to the very code of life, we're just all these beautiful letters. They are our unique ingredients. And so based on how these ingredients are influenced each and every day over these lives will depend how they express or repress. And it's not all just the epigenome or just the genetic component, but it's really, again, how's it all perceived, interpreted, informed, influenced? And so we can get close. I love the approach. It's a very intelligent approach to say, okay, wait, we know that scientifically at a cellular level, at a system level coming down into the cell, we have these 12 core components that will either speed up or slow down, or at least neutralize this process, right? So they're either going to help us or hurt us get to where we want to go. And so if we could just get all those at once, great. So it is nice to have kind of that blanket, that safety blanket, which is what you've brought to market. Yet also the very things that we do in our own life every day are going to also add to that, right? So let me just be clear. I love a good supplement. I love a good molecule. I'm all about it. And let us realize that we can't supplement our way out of a poor mental health state, a bad environment, abusive relationships, terrible diet, lack of sleep, lack of sunlight, lack of social bonding and connection. And so, Chris, where I'm curious, A,
Mhm.
why is it so popular? And then B, let's talk about how we can actually get really intentional and curious about, well, why all this talk about longevity and what is it that we're really trying to design? A life worth living. So, why is longevity so popular right now?
I think it's popular now because for the first time, people are realizing that you actually can impact the way in which you age, specifically the pace at which you age. You can accelerate your aging and decelerate your aging. And this is scientific fact. I mean, we all know it actually. People resist it when I first tell them. But then when I give the example of like, smoke a pack of cigarettes for a decade, do you think that that person looks older after that decade or younger than the person who is like physically fit and eating a healthy diet? Obviously, that person smoking looks older, and we know it in scientific studies. We look at the photographs of the people who are smokers versus non-smokers, and we see this stark contrast. And then we can do it in animal studies where we can, put a stressor on an animal, and we can see that we can speed up their aging, and then we can give them healthy lifestyles for a mouse, that is, and then we can see that we're actually slowing down their pace of aging. We can see it in biological age tests and epigenetic tests now, where we can actually accelerate or decelerate the pace of aging. So we know that it is something that's malleable, the aging process. So understanding that it's malleable, now people want to understand what they can do in their lifestyles to be able to slow down the pace as much as possible, while more advanced scientific methods are being produced and created for public consumption, so to speak, in the future. So, and I think that you've got different psychographics in the space. You've got like the science obsessed types that are like the biohackers, who it tends to be like male dominated in their 30s, who are trying to experiment with all different supplement stacks and so on, and quantified self and so on. Then you've got others, like for example, we have customers of ours who were featured in Fortune magazine and Business Insider a couple of weeks ago for among the best results on what's called the Rejuvenation Olympics that somebody in this field named Brian Johnson had created. Who's spending $2 million a year. He's more of that biohacker type that I formerly mentioned.
Yeah. Living by the algorithm. Yeah.
Exactly. But our customers are like, one of them is a single mother making less than six figures a year, living in Arizona, who just takes our supplements and has outranked Brian on his own Rejuvenation Olympics board. So she's spending just over $100 a month, and she's doing better than someone spending $2 million a year, right? And this isn't the biohacker type. This is just an ordinary American mom, right? So it's nice to see that it's expanding. It's going beyond just those biohackers to, everyday people. It's amazing to see that.
I actually really love that story because he takes such a radical approach for so many, that just the realization of like what speaks to me about that is going, yes, you don't need $2 million. It doesn't have to be a massive overhaul. It's the small hinges that swing the big doors. It's the little things that if we do them consistently and we do them well, can just pay off huge dividends. And that's such a beautiful example. So I'm curious, you guys have a biological age test that you offer as well. Do you have any of the data sets coming back? Obviously, it's, personal data, but if I don't know if people are sharing it, I don't know if they're giving you access to be able, the approval to look at it. I'm just very, very curious of now you're several years in the marketplace. You guys really have an intelligently designed product, so that's a support in lifestyle. Are you seeing any of the numbers coming back of really kind of showing a large picture of what's going on over time?
Yes, we are. So as you mentioned, we sell a kit called Novos Age, which includes three tests. One is biological pace of aging. This is based on the Columbia and Duke University algorithm called Dunedin Pace. It is the most accurate and precise of the clocks out there right now. The second is biological age. This is less accurate, admittedly, than the pace of aging, but it is scratching the itch. This is what everyone wants to know, is like, what is my biological age? That's more historical driven, whereas your pace of aging is looking at your future trajectory, right? And we think that that's more important. It's also more actionable. And then we also measure telomere length. We did a case study where we administered this test prior to consuming Novos Core and Novos Boost, our two flagship products. And then after 6 months, and this was done by a third-party lab. We didn't touch the data. We didn't touch the samples. They interacted with the customers on our behalf. And we found that we were able to reduce the biological pace of aging for 73% of the participants. And I think equally as impressive is that 0% of the participants accelerated their aging, which you would expect some people would have based on lifestyle stressors, whether that be not sleeping well or financial difficulties or drinking too much alcohol or not eating healthily, whatever it might be. Nobody accelerated. And the p-value for the data geeks out there, the p-value is 0.001. So that means that it is less than 1 in 1,000 chance that this is mere coincidence. So we were really excited about that. We've also done, I haven't mentioned this, but if you care to learn more, we've done a number of experiments as well, looking at DNA damage, cellular senescence, a process called oxytosis, ferroptosis, which is associated with Alzheimer's disease. The short story is that we have had amazingly positive results for all of those studies to date, but we're validating our combined formula, right? So beyond simply having the evidence behind our ingredients, we want to ensure that the combination of our ingredients is actually having the desired effect. And that's why we're investing our resources into proving out the formula.
I love it. So, as you are bringing wonderful, proven solutions that can support any of us to market, thank you for that, and the scientific rigor that you and your team put behind it, that makes us all very happy as consumers. But let's really kind of talk about the why. Meaning, why should I even care about slowing down aging? Why should I take a supplement? Why? And it may seem like a silly, obvious question, but if the average, let me just say the everyday, not average, that's the wrong word. If the everyday person is just, they're living their life, they're doing their thing, and they're seeing what their family lineage was, y- you know, the idea that more is possible, I don't know that it's really modeled in everyday society. It is with outliers. It is when you're at a high performing levels because you have to stay at your best, you have to stay at your peak. But kind of every day, I'm just getting by. I'm living my life. I'm paying my bills. I'm taking care of my kids. I'm getting the dog to the vet. I'm taking care of the parents and hoping I don't end up like them. So somebody that their biggest concern right now is maybe more just A, getting by, B, like I hope that I don't have to manage my own disease, but maybe they're already on high blood pressure, right? Maybe they've already got a thyroid issue. Maybe they're pre-diabetic. So we look at kind of the median American consumer. They've got at least 3 diagnoses by the time they're getting in their 40s. They're on multiple medications. And many of them are not quite yet thinking like, hey, I want to live a long time really well. They're just trying to get by. So what would you say to somebody like that as to why they should even be interested in or in this conversation or considering a support tool like what you offer over at Novos?
Sure. So I think what's important to emphasize is that longevity is not simply about increasing lifespan. It's about increasing health span and to minimize the health span lifespan gap. So that this health span lifespan gap is something that has been increasing in the United States. As of 2020, it was 9.2 years. So the average life expectancy was 73.2 years. And so the period or the point at which the health span ends, so you have your first chronic disease of aging, so to speak, would be 64 years. So 9.2 years that you're sick, and many people even longer, like you said, many people in their 40s and 50s are already sick like that. So when we're talking about longevity, we're talking about staving off these diseases of aging. And what are those? Most forms of cancer, the number one risk factor is aging. Cardiovascular disease, number one risk factor is aging. Alzheimer's, dementia, type 2 diabetes, glaucoma, sarcopenia. I mean, the list goes on. These are all primarily caused by the aging process. So anything you can do to try to slow down that aging process, you're going to statistically reduce the likelihood that you're going to have one of these chronic illnesses, or at least delay the point at which you actually come down with one of these illnesses. And I think a really empowering message is that it's actually far less dictated by your genetics than once thought, right? So there was a scientific paper in the journal Genetics that came out a couple of years ago, or maybe more like 4 or 5 years ago now, that found that the our lifespans are 90% or more based on our lifestyles and our environment, and 10% or less based on our genetics. So even if you have a family lineage of specific diseases, uh, with rare exceptions, oftentimes these are things that you can actually prevent or delay by significantly shifting your lifestyle, not living the same lives that your parents and your grandparents lived, but
Yeah.
improving your health. So, considering the foods you eat, how much you eat, and when you eat them, considering your relationships and if they're positive relationships or if they're toxic relationships, how you deal and cope with stress, your physical activity levels, if you care for your sleep, right? These are different factors that contribute to your health in the short term and in the long term. And so, for people who are living, the average American who's already overwhelmed with all of the stressors of their lives, what I would suggest is to just take it one step at a time. And to that point, Novos, we're a public benefit corporation. I have intentionally founded us this way so that I could do more for the public interest than I would normally be able to do based on fiduciary responsibilities to shareholders. So we go on. One of the things that we offer is this questionnaire that you can click on the top corner of our website on the quiz link, and this will be in the form of a mobile app soon as well. And you just answer a handful of questions. After about 10 minutes, you get your report, and it tells you what lifestyle aspects you need the most help with, what will have the most significant positive impact on your longevity. It might be something simple like not brushing your teeth enough, or sitting still for too long and not standing enough each day, right? Things that are not necessarily intuitive. It's not going to tell you simply the obvious things like eat more vegetables. Of course, that's in there, but there's many other recommendations you might get. And we then give you actionable advice for how to integrate this into your lifestyle. So I would suggest for those who are feeling overwhelmed to take this quiz, get these recommendations, and then maybe you get a dozen recommendations. Find just one that you think that you can actually conquer. One of these things that you can integrate into your life and do so effectively. And once you achieve that, then look at the second easiest thing for you to integrate and achieve. And as you knock these things down one by one, it's not like a New Year's resolution where you're going to do everything at once. Just do one of these at a time and achieve it. And when you integrate this into your lifestyle, it becomes a habit. And then that is something that you can sustain over the long term and actually make a significant impact on your health and your longevity.
I love that. Thank you for offering that. Thank you for talking about that and just highlighting the fact that it can be so little and simple. And it doesn't have to be. I feel that what I hear often from our clients at the Human Longevity Institute and just in the industry is that everywhere you go, it just seems to be ubiquitous that it's, eat a certain way, sleep a certain way, move a certain way. And yes, and manage your stress. Okay, those are that's actually all right. It's all
Yeah.
correct. It's perfect. Yet because we hear it everywhere, it's almost like it's become white noise to most people. And it just seems like they should all over themselves. I should go to the gym. I should get to bed earlier. I should go do some deep breathing. And yet they don't. And so I like the approach, even how you were just saying, sometimes it might just be that you're not brushing your teeth enough. So I appreciate that you've got some more detail in your quiz and that it's not just more of the same, but there's a lot of other details and tiny suggestions in there that can start to move the needle for people and just give them a fresh approach to feeling successful, to feeling inspired and empowered. Because when we feel like we've done the things, and the things haven't really worked for us, and then we just keep hearing to do the same things, it feels like, okay, really? Is that all it is? I'm just gonna stay on the couch and eat the junk food and not do anything. So thank you. I want to applaud you guys for that. And I'm wondering, I have two kind of personal questions for you. We've got a few minutes left if you're willing, is that I heard on one of your other interviews, you were sharing kind of your journey when the before Novos, and you had a really successful startup, and then that one kind of went away, and then another one came to be. And I know I'm really shortening the storyline here, but you went through a short-term bout of depression. And why I want to bring this up is that I feel one of the really important things that we get the opportunity to talk about is, okay, I can do all the lifestyle things. I can do the right things. But if we don't have the mental desire, right? The desire, the to want something, to want something more for ourselves. If we're sitting in depression, in the state of blah, and I'd like to hear from you in your own experience, it could make it really hard. You can be doing all the right things and it could still not really move the needle in a significant way, because what is a long life worth if it isn't worth living? Right. And so I believe we have an opportunity to do a better job of really talking about the role of perception and emotions and mental health and well being. How did you help yourself? Chris, you did something very, very simple during that time that kind of made a profound shift for you. And I'm wanting to unpack it here today for our listeners. When you were going through that time of depression, it was really blah. It was hard to find the motivation and the desire to really go do things very differently. What was it that actually shifted the gears for you and kind of gave you yourself back?
Yeah. So I entered a period of depression in my late 20s going into 30. And part of it was because I had a very successful company that actually imploded. Long story behind that, but I went from being on Times Square billboards and having done very well financially to having no money in my bank account, my apartment being robbed during Hurricane Sandy, when I was kicked out of my home in New York City, and coming home to basically nothing. And then my ego, my self-identity was all invested into this venture, into this company that was no longer. And I was basically 30, and I said, what have I accomplished? Who am I at 30 if I have nothing anymore? Is at the perspective I had. I have since evolved and learned, but at the moment, that's how I looked at things. And I fell into the state of anhedonia, this mindset of finding no pleasure in anything, and not having desire for practically anything. What I did have a desire for, though, if there was one thing, was to not be depressed anymore. That was something that was clear. Like, I don't want to feel the way I'm feeling. And so that is something that led me, actually, part of my health journey was really just doing a lot of research into, like, could it be nutrient deficiencies that are leading me to feel this way? Could it be, lifestyle factors? Should I be meditating? So I took up meditation for the first time in my life, right? And so a lot of things that are now integrated into my lifestyle today were a result of me being in this low point in my life. And I'm grateful for those, because they have had a positive influence on my life to this day, and having them integrated into my life. So yeah, going through that experience, it was eye-opening for me. I I think really just each day, looking into myself, self-reflecting, meditating, and being able to observe the things that were going on in my mind, and for the first time, kind of being still with myself, and um, asking myself these questions of why, constantly, like a child oftentimes annoyingly asks a parent, like, why, but why, but why. I actually took on that practice, and it was largely the result of this spiritualist I came across through a series of happenstance or serendipity, if you'd like. But long story short, I read his work. His name is Jiddu Krishnamurti, and his work causes you to really just question things, question the status quo, question why you perceive things the way you perceive them. And it's not looking to others for answers, it's looking internally for your answers. And that was eye-opening for me, to not look for others to give me the answer about my depression, but to look inside of myself. And then as part of that process, I always ask myself the question, why? So, for example, why am I so depressed from losing my business? Okay, then I have an answer. Maybe my ego was involved in that. Okay, but why is my ego involved? What does it say about me as a human being? And then I have an answer. And then, okay, but why? And then eventually you get down to like the kernel of truth of what is motivating you or how you perceive the world, and what are the things, like a lot of it does come down to love and that you're seeking in life and so on. But asking those questions, I was able to really get down to what was causing that depression, what I was seeking in my life. And then from there, I was able to use it as a launch pad to get out of that depression and then start the next chapter in my life.
I really want to thank you for sharing that so much, because what you just highlighted was, again, a very brave but simple process. Just some personal self inventory, being willing to ask when you bumped into something, when it was there, being willing to ask why. And not just stop at the first or second or even fifth answer, but continuing to go deeper and deeper with a sense of curiosity. Now, in Dr. Mario Martinez's work around centenarian consciousness, one of the biomarkers, and they have correlated it actually with some different. They've correlated it with objective biomarkers, with some blood work, and on some of, they're actually pairing up on some of the clocks coming up. But my point, one of the indicators is curiosity. So there's a realm of perception, there's a realm of emotion, how we perceive time, how we perceive age, right? There's certain how we perceive our health, ourself, our emotions. So people, these centenarian consciousness, these individuals have a higher expression or a higher tendency to express curiosity, gratitude, appreciation. So there's really something to be said for just being curious, being inquisitive, and that can start with that question, why? And it was something simple and powerful enough that took you out of a state of apathy and really re-engaged you. So now here you are today with this amazing company. So in our last two questions, and I'm going to let you go because I know you have a lot ahead of you today. Share with us, what is your personal daily longevity stack? How do you move through your own longevity life each and every day?
Wow. Yeah, that could be a whole episode, but I'll give you the quick version. Let's see. I wake up. Um, I have a glass of water with some mixed sodium potassium salt. So like Morton's makes light salt, so I get a little bit of electrolytes in early in the morning. Go outside for a walk at the natural sunlight in my eyes to entrain that circadian rhythm. I then progress into a jog. I do zone 2 cardio for about 25-30 minutes. Go to the gym, weight lift for some strength training. Come home, have a cup of coffee, sometimes decaf, sometimes caffeinated. I don't want to be resistant to the effects, so I or build up a tolerance. So I go back and forth with it, and then I sit down on my laptop. I start working. I have my first meal. If it's a workout day, I'll have a protein shake. I've covered that on my blog, slowmyage.com, if you care to know what that is. Then from there, have another meal probably at about 3 p.m. and then dinner at about 7. So it's about a roughly speaking like 16-8 time restricted feeding window. And at night, I have Hue red light bulb, well, Hue color shifting bulbs, but I turn them red in the evening about an hour before bedtime. So my
Perfect.
melatonin will get produced, and I'll lay in bed and meditate for about 10 minutes before going to sleep. I fall asleep within 3 or 4 minutes, according to my Aura ring, very quick. Um, there's a bunch of things in between there. I take obviously Novos Core, my own product, and Novos Boost, some fish oil, eat a largely Mediterranean-based diet, specifically the Novos longevity diet, which is basically a Mediterranean diet with a few tweaks to it. That's the quick summary.
I love it. Gang, you would think he watched the circadian flow program. I mean, you are just living it. I'm so proud of you. That's so exciting. It's so exciting. So in the midst of your day, stress strikes. What is and you're aware of it, right? Like, how do you real time help yourself increase your own resilience and capacity as as distress is coming at you?
Easy. One of three things. One is I have a beautiful collie, like Lassie.
Yeah.
I go over, I just give her a hug and a kiss and pet her, and that immediately, like, stress can melt away. A second way is for me to just set everything in context. So I think through my life, and I think through the most challenging experiences in my life. For example, my brain tumor, depression, losing my mother to cancer. And then I ask the question, is what I'm going through right now any harder than those things? Like, I've gotten through those things and I've lived plenty of happy days since then. So what is to make me think that this is any different? Like, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get past it and I'm going to be happy again. So let me just get through this. And so that kind of makes the stress melt away as well, because I'm setting the context, and it's not nearly as bad as I may have initially thought in the moments emotionally. And the third would be a meditation. Just close my eyes and try not to think, but then observing those thoughts that naturally come up, and oftentimes that is enough to take me out of that stressful mindset.
Excellent. Excellent points. Thank you. Because everybody deals with it, right? And so we need those little micro moments. I call it kind of pumping the brakes so that we can take our foot off the gas pedal of life, pump over into parasympathetic, help that system remodulate so that we increase our capacity so that we can keep flowing through with just bringing our best self forward. And you are clearly doing that every day, Chris. I could ask you probably 1,000 more questions. You just brought up one of your websites, Slow My Age, correct? I get it right?
Yeah, Slow My Age is my personal blog. It's for the geeks that want to see all of my biometrics and the approaches I take, my lifestyle, and so on. I'm also on Instagram and X as Slow My Age. And then we've got novoslabs.com, which is Novos Labs on all of the social networks as well.
Perfect. Hey, because you sit at the seat where you do in this industry, is there any advice you would give to all of us to say, hey, be really mindful of this? Just kind of watch out for. Again, it's one of the fastest growing, big buzzworthy industry. We're all now knowing more is possible. We can actually slow down this rate and pace of aging. There are tools out there for us to do it in our lifestyle, in our mind, in our environment, as well as with tools like what you offer over at Novos. Any like, hey, danger zone, if you're seeing this, if you're reading this, if you're hearing this, just kind of be mindful. Any big red flags out there that we should be
What
aware
I
of?
would what I would say is it's something that is would not be as apparent or obvious to people, but being in the industry, you and I can recognize it. It is that there are many players entering the industry claiming to be longevity when they aren't. They're simply general health, or they have a very specific aim like improving energy or whatnot, but they don't have any evidence whatsoever that this is going to improve health span and lifespan. There's longevity is distinct from, say, a short-term health outcome. And so you just want to be clear that there's a difference between the two. And it's if you want a short-term health outcome, that's fine, but it's not necessarily longevity simply because it's good for you in the short term. So yeah, just to be aware that there are true longevity players that are research backed, and then there's everyone else who is either copycatting or they're in a different industry altogether, and they're just trying to steal the thunder from the industry.
That is so perfect. Remember, friends, longevity is the long game. And what you do today does add up and does affect how you will live your tomorrows. Chris, thank you so much for being our guest today. It was an honor and a joy. Everybody, be sure, look at the show notes below, grab those links, go explore, get the longevity quiz that Chris told you about today. Remember, it's all small, simple steps. You don't have to do it all today or even tomorrow. Just one little step at a time can truly create lasting transformation in your body, your health, and your life. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Until next time, go thrive by design. Bye.